Darius Voss blinked against the harsh lights of the arena, his boots sinking slightly into the dust-covered floor. The air smelled of sweat, blood, and something metallic, like old rusted iron. A deep hum vibrated through the ground beneath him, the sound of thousands of alien spectators gathered in the towering stands above. Across the battlefield, his opponent waited. The Growlcore, a towering six-limbed reptilian beast with armor-like scales and sharp, bone-crushing jaws. It stood nearly twice his height, its yellow eyes glowing with the hunger of a predator. Darius exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders. His black combat shirt clung to his muscular frame, torn in places from his previous fights. Sweat dripped down his temple, but his face remained calm. He had survived worse. From a high balcony overlooking the arena, Princess Calith Varen watched with mild disinterest. She was of the Thrin Dominion, a noble race with violet skin and silver, luminescent eyes. Her long white hair was braided with delicate metal rings, a sign of her royal status. She wore an elegant high-collared dress, though her posture was relaxed, one arm resting on the balcony's edge. "Another human," she murmured, her voice smooth but uninterested. "They break too easily." Beside her, an older Thrin noble chuckled. "Indeed, this one won't last long." The arena gates slammed shut. A deep gong echoed across the battlefield. The fight had begun. The Growlcore lunged first, moving far faster than something its size should. It swiped with a powerful claw, aiming to crush Darius with a single strike. But Darius was already moving. He ducked, rolling beneath the massive arm, feeling the wind of its attack pass inches from his head. As he sprang back to his feet, he struck 2 quick punches to its ribs before leaping back to avoid a counterattack. The crowd gasped. Calith raised an eyebrow. That was unexpected. The Growlcore roared in frustration and attacked again, slashing and stomping with earth-shaking force. Darius twisted, dodged, and weaved through every attack, his movements precise, almost calculated. He was smaller, weaker, but he was faster. The beast struck again, this time landing a blow. A clawed hand smashed into Darius's shoulder, sending him flying across the arena. He hit the ground hard, dust exploding around him. The audience cheered. Calith sighed. "A shame. I thought he might be different." But then, a sound echoed across the arena. Laughter. Low, rough at first, then growing louder. Darius pushed himself up, grinning. His right arm hung at an odd angle, dislocated, but instead of crying out in pain, he chuckled. "Not bad," he muttered to himself. Then, without hesitation, he grabbed his limp arm and wrenched it back into place. A sickening po-pee filled the air. Calith's stomach twisted. Around her, alien nobles recoiled in horror. The audience that had once cheered now murmured in uneasy silence. The Growlcore hesitated. Darius flexed his fingers, rolling his shoulder. His grin widened. He cracked his neck, then his knuckles. "All right," he said, his voice carrying through the silent arena. "My turn." Calith gripped the balcony's railing, her silver eyes locked on the human below. For the first time, she felt something she had never associated with humans. The arena was silent. Thousands of alien spectators, once cheering for the Growlcore, now watched in uneasy fascination. No one had expected the human to survive, let alone laugh after taking such a brutal hit. Darius Voss rolled his newly adjusted shoulder, his smirk never fading. He was hurt, badly. His ribs ached, his muscles screamed, and his arm throbbed with dull pain. But none of that mattered. He had been in worse fights. Across from him, the Growlcore hesitated. The creature was a born killer, but something unnerved it now. It had seen fear in many opponents. It had seen desperation. But never this. Darius took a step forward, his boots crunching against the dusty arena floor. The Growlcore flinched. From the royal balcony above, Princess Calith Varen narrowed her silver eyes. The human's movements were slower now, a little stiff, but his confidence hadn't wavered. His blue-gray eyes were sharp and focused, studying his opponent like a predator waiting for an opening. Caliph wasn't sure what disturbed her more, the fact that he had survived the hit, or that he had enjoyed it. Impossible, a noble beside her muttered. He should be broken. He should be dead, another added. Caliph said nothing. Below, the Growlcore roared and charged. It wasn't holding back this time. Darius braced himself. The massive beast swung both of its thick, clawed arms at once, trying to crush him between them. Instead of dodging, Darius did something insane. He ran straight toward it. At the last moment, he dropped into a slide, skimming beneath the monster's attack. He twisted mid-slide and drove his elbow into the soft joint behind the Growlcore's knee. The beast roared in pain, stumbling forward. Darius rolled to his feet and immediately launched himself onto the Growlcore's back. He wrapped one arm around its thick, scaled throat and locked his legs around its torso. With his free hand, he slammed his fist into the side of its head. Again and again. The crowd gasped. The Growlcore thrashed, trying to throw him off. Darius held on, his muscles screaming in protest. His arm was still weak, but he ignored it. He tightened his grip around the beast's throat, cutting off its air. Caliph's breath caught. He's going to win, she whispered before she could stop herself. The nobles beside her scoffed. Impossible. But Caliph wasn't so sure. Below, the Growlcore's movements slowed. Its massive hands clawed at Darius, but its strength was failing. The human's endurance was terrifying. He wasn't the strongest, but he refused to stop. Then, with a final, desperate effort, the Growlcore spun and threw itself backward. Darius had just enough time to curse before the full weight of the creature slammed him into the ground. A cloud of dust exploded into the air. The audience went silent. Caliph leaned forward, gripping the railing. Was it over? For a few seconds, nothing moved. The Growlcore remained slumped on the ground, unmoving. Then, a cough, a low groan, and a chuckle. The dust cleared, revealing Darius, half buried in the dirt, a wide grin on his bloodied face. He slowly pushed himself up, every muscle trembling. His face was bruised, his knuckles raw, but he was still standing. The Growlcore did not rise. The gong sounded. The fight was over. Darius had won. Caliph's hands tightened around the railing. This human wasn't just durable. He was dangerous. A wave of silence rolled over the arena. Thousands of alien spectators stared down at the battlefield in disbelief. The Growlcore, a monstrous, six-limbed predator that had torn through dozens of warriors, lay motionless in the dust. And the human, Darius Voss, stood. Barely, but he stood. His breaths were ragged, his body bruised and bloodied, but that wild grin never left his face. He wiped a trickle of blood from his mouth and looked up toward the royal balcony, where Princess Caliph Tharen and the nobles of the Thrin Dominion sat. His gaze locked onto Caliph's silver eyes. He winked. Caliph's hands tensed around the balcony railing. Her stomach twisted in a way she didn't understand. He should not have won. Yet there he was. The silence didn't last long. The slow roar of voices surged through the crowd, first in shock, then in something more dangerous. Excitement, awe, fear. The spectators had come expecting a quick execution, but instead they had witnessed something impossible. Unbelievable, one noble whispered. Monstrous, another murmured. Caliph exhaled slowly, her eyes still locked on the human below. A human should not be able to endure that kind of punishment. A human should not be laughing after a fight like that. And yet Darius Voss had done both. A heavy footstep echoed through the air. Darius turned just as two Thrin enforcers entered the arena, their golden armor gleaming under the artificial lights. The Thrin High Overseer, a broad-shouldered, four-eyed alien with dark blue skin, stepped forward with an unreadable expression. "You are victorious," the overseer announced, his deep voice carrying across the arena. "By the laws of the Thrin Dominion, you are granted survival and the right to higher challenges." Darius cracked his neck. "Higher challenges, huh?" Calith narrowed her eyes. That was not the response of a man who wanted to leave the arena. That was the response of a man who wanted more. The overseer hesitated, then gestured to the guards. "Take him." The enforcers marched toward Darius, but he didn't resist. He let them grab his arms, though he flashed a cocky grin. "Easy, boys," he said, wincing as they pulled his sore limbs. "I just won. At least buy me dinner before you get so grabby." One of the enforcers sneered but said nothing. As they led him toward the exit, Darius cast one last glance up at Calith. He held her gaze for a second longer than was polite. Then he laughed. Calith's chest tightened. She had met warriors, generals, assassins. She had seen combat since she was a child, trained in strategy and war. She understood how power worked, how fear controlled people. But this human didn't fear anything. And that made him more dangerous than any beast in the arena. Back in the lower levels of the Thrin stronghold, Darius was tossed into a holding cell. The metal doors hissed shut behind him, and he rolled his shoulders, testing his injuries. "Not bad," he muttered to himself. A voice spoke from the shadows. "You're either the bravest or the dumbest human I've ever seen." Darius turned. Sitting in the corner of the cell was another human, a woman with short black hair, sharp green eyes, and a scar along her jaw. Darius raised an eyebrow. Well, and here I thought I was the only one." She smirked. "Not anymore." Darius chuckled. This just got interesting. Darius leaned against the cold metal wall of the cell, studying the woman in front of him. She looked tough, lean muscle, sharp green eyes, and an old scar running along her jawline. Her clothes were torn, her knuckles bruised, and yet she sat there, calm and unshaken. Darius smirked. "Didn't think I'd meet another human here." The woman lifted an eyebrow. "Neither did I." He sat down across from her, stretching his arms with a wince. His body still ached from the fight, but the sharp pain was fading, replaced by the usual dull ache of survival. "What's your name?" he asked. "Reyna," she said, crossing her arms. "Reyna Carter. And you?" "Darius Voss." He gave her a playful grin. "Winner of tonight's death match." Reyna snorted. "I saw. You're insane." Darius laughed. "I get that a lot." She studied him, her sharp gaze scanning his face, his posture, everything about him. Finally, she shook her head. "You should be dead." Darius stretched his fingers, testing his sore joints. "Yeah, I get that a lot too." Reyna leaned forward, her voice low. "That thing you did out there, the way you snapped your own bones back into place like it was nothing. That's not normal. Not for a human." Darius tilted his head, considering her words. "What's normal for a human in a place like this?" Reyna exhaled slowly. "Fair point." For a few moments, the only sound was the distant hum of the Thrin fortress. Deep, mechanical, and constant. The air smelled like metal and recycled oxygen, the scent of a prison built to never let anyone go. Darius cracked his knuckles. "So, what's your story? How'd you end up here?" Reyna leaned back against the wall, her eyes flickering with something dark. "Got captured during a raid. My crew was running a job near Thrin space, smuggling weapons, tech, food. Nothing illegal by human standards, but the Dominion didn't like it. They killed my team and threw me in here." Darius frowned. "How long have you been here?" Reyna's jaw tightened. "Too long." Darius didn't press. He could tell she wasn't the kind of person to talk about the past unless she wanted to. Instead, he grinned. "Well, today's your lucky day, because I don't plan on staying here long." Reyna let out a short, dry laugh. "You really think you can escape? No human has ever left this place alive." Darius leaned in, eyes glinting. Then I'll be the first. Reyna studied him again, as if trying to figure out what made him tick. Finally, she sighed and shook her head. You really are insane, she muttered. Darius grinned. Yeah, but it makes life more fun. Meanwhile, in the royal chambers, Princess Kelith stood near a towering window, overlooking the cityscape of Vorak Prime. The neon lights of the Thrin capital stretched for miles, illuminating the sky in shades of blue and violet. But her mind was elsewhere. The human, Darius Voss. Kelith had seen warriors before. She had seen gladiators rise and fall, had witnessed monsters rip through countless challengers. But she had never seen a human like him. He fought like he wasn't afraid of death. He laughed in the face of pain. And now he was in a prison cell, acting like he still had control. Kelith's fingers tightened around the edge of her robe. What are you, Darius Voss? A voice interrupted her thoughts. Your Highness, a guard bowed. The overseer requests your presence. There is a situation. Kelith turned, her silver eyes narrowing. What kind of situation? The guard hesitated. The human. He isn't like the others. Kelith's heart beat faster. She already knew that. And that terrified her more than anything. Darius sat against the cold metal wall, arms crossed as he watched Reyna. She had a sharp mind. He could see it in her calculating gaze. So, she said, leaning forward, you really think you can escape? Darius grinned. I don't think. I know. Reyna sighed. You sound just like my old captain. Darius shrugged. Then your old captain was a smart guy. Reyna didn't answer. Instead, she stared at the dimly lit ceiling, her expression unreadable. All right, she said finally. Let's hear it. What's your plan? Darius sat up, rolling his shoulders. Simple. Cause chaos. Break out. Steal a ship. Reyna blinked. That's your plan? Yep. She scoffed. That's not a plan. That's suicide. Darius chuckled. Only if you don't do it right. Reyna studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was sharp, dangerous. You know what? She said. I think I like you. Darius smirked. Most people do. Reyna rolled her eyes. So, tell me, genius, how exactly do you plan to cause chaos in a high-security Thrin prison? Darius reached down and tapped the metal cuffs around his wrists. These aren't just restraints. They monitor us. Heart rate, body temp, even pain levels. Reyna frowned. Yeah, so. Darius grinned. So, what happens if my pain levels suddenly go off the charts? Reyna's eyes widened as she realized what he meant. No way. You're insane. Darius cracked his knuckles. Yeah, but it works. Reyna shook her head. You're seriously going to break your own bones just to trip the alarm. Darius laughed. Already did it once. I'll do it again. Reyna exhaled sharply. All right, fine. Say this works. The guards come running. Then what? Darius grinned. Then we do what humans do best. Reyna tilted her head. And what's that? Darius' eyes gleamed. We fight. Meanwhile, in the Thrin war chamber, Princess Kelith stood before the overseer, her silver eyes locked onto the large blue-skinned Thrin commander. The human is dangerous, the overseer growled. His deep voice echoed in the chamber. He should be eliminated. Kelith's grip tightened around the edge of her cloak. No. The overseer's 4 yellow eyes narrowed. No. Kelith took a deep breath. He's not just any human. He's something else. The overseer grunted. You're fascinated by him. Kelith's jaw tightened. I'm cautious. The overseer leaned forward. You've seen him fight. He doesn't feel pain the way others do. He laughs in the face of suffering. Kelith's pulse quickened, but she kept her face neutral. We need to study him, she said. The overseer let out a low growl. Or we need to kill him before he becomes a problem. Kelith lifted her chin. I will handle him. personally. The overseer watched her for a moment, then leaned back. Very well, princess. But be warned, this human is not like the others. Caliph already knew that, and that was exactly why she couldn't look away. The prison block was quiet, too quiet. Darius sat on the cold floor, rolling his shoulders. Reyna watched him with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. "You really gonna do this?" she asked. Darius grinned. "You're acting like I haven't already." Reyna shook her head. "You humans are crazy." Darius flexed his fingers, then took a deep breath. And then he slammed his wrist against the metal wall. A sickening crack echoed through the cell. Pain shot up his arm, but instead of crying out, Darius laughed. Reyna shuddered. "You're insane." Darius smirked through gritted teeth. "I know." His wrist throbbed, but more importantly, his cuffs started flashing red. The alarm blared. Seconds later, heavy boots pounded against the floor as two Thren guards rushed in. Reyna moved first. She leaped up, twisting midair, and slammed both feet into the first guard's head. He stumbled backward, hissing in pain. Darius wasted no time. Even with his broken wrist, he lunged forward and grabbed the second guard's weapon. The Thren tried to stop him, but Darius used his good hand to slam his elbow into the alien's throat. The guard choked, falling to the ground. Reyna snatched a plasma dagger from the unconscious Thren. "Move." Darius grabbed the fallen rifle and bolted out of the cell. The hallway lights turned red. The alarms wailed louder. Reyna sprinted beside him. "We need to get to the hangar." Darius grinned. "Lead the way, sweetheart." Reyna scowled. "Don't call me that." Darius just laughed. Even with a broken wrist, a gun in one hand, and an army of aliens chasing them, he was having fun. Meanwhile, Princess Caliph watched the security footage. Her silver eyes narrowed as the human tore through the guards like they were nothing. Even injured, he fought like a demon. The overseer's voice rumbled beside her. "I told you, he's dangerous." Caliph barely heard him. She was too focused on Darius. The way he moved, the way he smiled even in battle. She had studied humans before. They feared pain. They avoided it. But not this one. He embraced it. A strange feeling twisted in her chest. She turned sharply. "Send reinforcements to the hangar." The overseer nodded. Caliph watched the screen as Darius and Reyna ran through the base, taking down guards like they were nothing. She wasn't afraid of him. She was intrigued. And that was far more dangerous. Back in the corridors, Darius and Reyna skidded around a corner, nearly crashing into a squad of Thren soldiers. "Cover me," Reyna shouted. Darius raised his stolen rifle and unleashed a barrage of plasma fire. The guards ducked, but Reyna was already moving. She leaped onto a crate, launched herself forward, and slashed through the first guard with her plasma dagger. Darius grinned. "You're not bad." Reyna didn't look back. "I'm better than you." Darius laughed and shot another guard in the leg. "We'll see." The hangar doors loomed ahead. But just as they reached them, a new figure stepped into their path. Darius stopped cold. Princess Caliph stood there, flanked by elite Thren warriors. Her silver eyes gleamed like stars, and her white cloak billowed behind her. "Going somewhere?" she asked. Darius smirked. "Yeah, you wanna come?" Caliph's lips curled into the smallest of smiles. "I think I'll stop you instead." Darius cracked his neck. "I'd like to see you try." Darius stood still, gripping the stolen rifle in his good hand. His broken wrist still throbbed, but he ignored it. His focus was on the woman blocking his escape. Princess Caliph. Silver eyes, white cloak, a presence that commanded respect, even from a guy like him. Reyna tensed beside him. "We don't have time for this." Darius grinned. "We'll make time." Caliph stepped forward, her voice calm. "Surrender, human. You cannot win." Darius chuckled. "See, that's the thing. I don't need to win. I just need to leave. Kelith tilted her head. You believe you can fight your way through my warriors? Darius rolled his shoulders. I was planning to. The princess sighed. Then she moved, faster than he expected. One moment, she was standing still. The next, she was right in front of him. Darius barely had time to react. He swung his rifle, but Kelith's hand shot up, grabbing the barrel. With a twist, she ripped the weapon from his grasp and tossed it aside. Darius whistled. Not bad. Then he threw a punch. Kelith dodged effortlessly, her silver eyes studying him. Darius tried again, this time aiming low. She blocked with precision, twisting his arm behind his back. Pain flared up his broken wrist. Darius laughed. Kelith hesitated for just a moment. That was all he needed. He used his free hand to grab her waist and yank her forward. Kelith gasped in surprise. Darius spun, breaking free from her grip. Before she could react, he dropped low and kicked her legs out from under her. The princess fell. Darius didn't stick around. He grabbed Reina's arm. Run. They sprinted toward the hangar doors. The Thrin warriors rushed after them, but Darius didn't stop. Reina slashed through the security panel with her plasma dagger, and the massive doors groaned open. Their ship, a stolen Thrin shuttle, was waiting. Darius grinned. We made it. But just as they reached the ramp, Kelith appeared again. She moved like a ghost, standing between them and the ship. Darius exhaled. Persistent, aren't you? Kelith's gaze locked onto his. I am not letting you go. Darius smirked. You sure about that? Kelith lifted a hand, her fingers glowing with crackling blue energy. Darius frowned. Oh. Lightning surged from her palm. Darius barely had time to dodge as the energy exploded against the ground, sending sparks flying. Reina cursed. She's a psychic. Darius wiped dust from his face. Okay. New plan. Kelith's voice was firm. You cannot escape, human. Darius tilted his head. What if I say, please? Kelith raised her hand again. Darius moved. He darted forward, not away, but straight toward her. Kelith's eyes widened in surprise. Darius ducked under her arm, spinning behind her. Before she could react, he grabbed her wrist and yanked her against him. For the first time, Kelith lost her balance. Darius leaned close, his voice low. Hate to break it to you, princess, but I'm leaving. Kelith's breath hitched. Then, Darius shoved her back. She stumbled, just enough for Reina to throw a smoke grenade at their feet. Boom! The hangar filled with thick, black smoke. Darius grabbed Reina's hand and sprinted up the ramp. Inside the ship, alarms blared. Get us out of here, Darius shouted. Reina jumped into the pilot's seat, hitting the ignition. The ship trembled as its engines roared to life. Outside, Kelith emerged from the smoke. She stared up as the ship lifted off the ground. For the first time in her life, she didn't know what to do. The human had escaped. And worse, he had made her hesitate. Darius smirked as they soared into the sky. He had a feeling this wasn't the last time he'd see the princess. The stolen Thrin shuttle cut through the dark void of space, its engines humming as it left the planet's atmosphere. Darius leaned back in his seat, rolling his sore shoulder. His wrist was still throbbing. But that wasn't his biggest concern. Reina, gripping the controls, let out a sharp breath. We actually pulled it off. Darius grinned. Told you we would. She shot him a glare. You also said we wouldn't get caught, which we definitely did. Darius chuckled, wincing as he flexed his fingers. Details, details. Reina shook her head, then glanced at his wrist. That's still broken, isn't it? Darius shrugged. Probably. Without warning, he reached over with his good hand, grabbed his injured wrist, and snapped it back into place. A sickening crack echoed through the cockpit. Reina froze. Darius let out a breath, rolling his fingers. Much better. Reina just stared at him. "You are not normal," she muttered. Darius grinned. "Oh, come on. I've had worse." Reyna looked like she wanted to argue, but before she cooled, an alarm blared. Her head snapped toward the radar. "We've got incoming." Darius' grin faded. "How many?" Reyna cursed. "One. Fast. And closing in." Darius leaned over her shoulder, watching the screen. The incoming ship was sleek, quick, and dangerous, and he recognized it immediately. "Caliph." "Persistent," he muttered. Reyna's hands flew over the controls. "We're faster. If we push the thrusters, we can." A blue energy blast slammed into their shields. The whole ship shook. Darius cursed. "She's not here to talk." Reyna gritted her teeth. "Then we'll make her listen." She spun the ship into a sharp dive, dodging another incoming blast. Calith's sleek fighter stayed right on their tail. Darius smirked. "All right, princess. Let's see what you've got." Inside her cockpit, Calith's silver eyes were locked onto the fleeing shuttle. She knew she should destroy it. She had the chance. One clean shot, and it would be over. But she hesitated. Again. The human had made her hesitate before. And now she was doing it again. Why? She clenched her jaw. This was weakness. The Thrin Empire did not tolerate weakness. Her hands tightened on the controls. She wouldn't fail again. Calith fired another blast. The shuttle dodged. Again. Again. And then a voice crackled over her comms. "Princess, if you're trying to impress me, it's working." Calith's breath caught. The human was speaking to her. She composed herself, her voice cold. "You are a fugitive. Surrender now." A laugh came through the speakers. "You really don't like losing, do you?" Her grip tightened. "You insult me." "Nah." Darius' voice was smooth. "I'm complimenting you. You're the best pilot I've seen." Calith felt something strange in her chest. Annoyance. Curiosity. Why did he speak so freely? Why did he not fear her? Darius continued. "How about we call this a draw?" Calith frowned. "A draw?" "Yeah." His voice was teasing. "You don't kill me. I don't crash into an asteroid trying to outrun you. Everybody wins." Calith hesitated. Then she pulled back her ship. Darius blinked at the radar. "Is she slowing down?" Reyna's jaw dropped. "She's letting us go." Darius chuckled. "Told you, she likes me." Calith heard him through the comms. Her silver eyes narrowed, and for the first time in her life, she smirked. "Enjoy your freedom, human." She cut the transmission and veered off, disappearing into the void. Darius leaned back in his seat. "I like her." Reyna groaned. "You are impossible." Darius grinned. Something told him this wasn't the last time he'd see the princess.